The amazing levels of citizen engagement that we saw in the grassroots in the 2008 elections, and I wanted to invite any of you to address that issue. Trevor?
Well, I would start by sounding like the raving radical that I usually don't. I think all of these cases raise very fundamental issues that needn't, I mean, the court will, because it is the court, slice and dice them in a very legalistic way. But underneath them all, you know, in Austin, the issue you have when we talk about, you know, are there 5 votes to overrule Austin, which sounds very boring, is whose democracy is this anyway? Why is it that entities of people, that something other than voters, are entitled to spend money in these elections? We say there can't be any foreign national money in our elections. Why should there be corporate money in elections, which is fundamentally what we're talking about, either as expenditures or contributions? Why couldn't you say, why don't we say, that only people who are in fact qualified to vote may contribute to candidates? Isn't it their election? When you look at the RNC case, you know, there are justice after justice that has looked at this and said, of course the size of a contribution makes a difference. You know, you would have to be under a rock to think that there was no difference between a $1 contribution and a $100,000 or $1 million contribution in terms of its effect on office holders, on the not just the appearance of corruption, but the reality of corruption, and therefore it is reasonable to limit that. And yet, you know, here you have the RNC coming back to say, well, you know, large contributions, unlimited contributions really shouldn't make any difference in our context. So yeah, I think these are very fundamental issues. We have seen them being fought back and forth over this battleground for most of the 20th century and now into the 21st, but the importance of the underlying issues are, you know, is not diminished.
Rick?
If I could be the House pessimist, which is a role I've been taking on a lot lately, I find it hard to believe that the 5 more conservative justices on this current Supreme Court would find any of these other interests any more palatable than the interests that have already been put out there. I mean, I think since Buckley, there's been a lack of candor in a good part of the campaign finance reform community in talking about what the interests are, when there's a lot of concern about leveling the playing field, but everything has to be couched in an anti-corruption way in order to satisfy the Supreme Court's interests, as was mentioned this morning about the name of the public financing provision. So I think that what's at stake in a lot of these cases is not about corruption, but about promoting equality, and it's going to take a change in Supreme Court personnel for there to be a change in what interests are going to be accepted and how those things are going to be balanced.
Well, I'm going to take a position a little bit between Trevor and Rick. I mean, I think Trevor's right that there are a whole bundle of important interests that are at work in these cases: competition, equality, time preservation, so forth. But and in the long run, I think there may be cause to think that a different court might be more open to a broader range of interests in weighing against the First Amendment impact of these kinds of laws. In the short term, I agree with Rick. I mean, we're dealing with a court that seems to be at best skeptical of these rules, so it seems unlikely that this is the court that's going to expand the playing field of what kinds of justifications can be used to support these laws. And as lawyers, we all want to win the cases we bring, so we're sort of forced to use the language that the court gives us in order to try to make the case within the framework of the doctrine as it exists.
Allison?
Yeah, just my 2 cents. I agree with Rick, but I don't think that it's a pessimistic view. I think it's an optimistic one.
That's why I'm pessimistic.
You know, why shouldn't we put Congress to the test of corruption when what we're talking about is their ability to write the rules by which they are elected? You know, why should they get more and broader interests to, you know, post hoc justify potentially rules that change things in clearly a way an incumbents are going to prefer, because they're after all the people who get to vote for the law. I mean, I think there's a lot of appealing feel to some of these competing values, but think about in practice what it means to provide, you know, members of Congress with greater latitude to restrict the activities of outside groups in politics.
Would you have that same skepticism about systems that were passed through voter initiatives, for instance, as those that were passed through legislation?
Yes, because I don't really think that an initiative is, I mean, what we're concerned about here isn't just, incumbent bad motives, but bad motives of majoritarian interests against minority interests or well-organized minority interests. I mean, it is making a decision playing out in politics about the fundamental ability of other people to do stuff. And I think that's very problematic constitutionally.
Sure, in the back.
Yes, my name is Joel Gora. I'm a professor at Brooklyn Law School, and I've been dealing with the constitutionality of campaign finance laws since the time of the Buckley case, which I helped argue in the Supreme Court. I'm also the proud co-author of a new book called Better Parties, Better Government, a realistic program for campaign finance reform with my co-author and friend Peter Wallison, American Enterprise Institute. The first half of this book, I think most people in this room will agree with. It's a harsh critique of our current campaign finance system. It says that it's in the thrall of the special interests, it is contrary to change, it discourages challenges to incumbency. We also feel that public financing with limits, mandatory limits, is not a good way to go either, because the limits are the ones the incumbents want to make life easier for them. We have a modest proposal that we think will solve the problem of too much influence by special interests, of not enough support for challenges, for new ideas, and that is to eliminate the statutory restriction on political parties' ability to use hard money, regulated money, limited money, from human beings' money, disclosed money, kosher money, for being able to use that kind of money to support their candidates in any way they want. So in effect, what we advocate, and here's my question, is a statutory change of the outcome in the Colorado 2 campaign finance case. So my question really is for Rick and anybody else. Do you think that pendulum that you're worried about swinging back is going to knock over the Colorado 2 case as well and bring about the result we think is good reform constitutionally, or do you think that Congress might be willing to take a look at that?
Well, I'll defer to Trevor and others who follow what Congress might do. In terms of the court, I think the first step is striking down Austin. If you think about the long-term Roberts program, first step is striking down Austin. The second step is speech now, striking down contributions to independent expenditure committees, and then this question of what comes after that. There's not going to be much left besides disclosure after those two steps occur.
Well, I think Colorado 2 was a abhorrent decision to anyone involved in parties, politics, etc. I recall watching the argument in the court, and the advocates on both sides said to the court when they saw with horror where things were going, oh, for goodness sake, don't say this is an independent expenditure. The party wanted a constitutional right to do this. The other side said it should be banned, but nobody thought it was independent. It was just a way for the court to cut that corner and get where they wanted to go. And political scientists ever since have been saying it's a bad result. So it wouldn't surprise me if Congress or otherwise did something about it. Whether that's an issue in the RNC case. There's another piece of that where the RNC is arguing that it's unconstitutional, and they're basically again asking the court to relitigate Colorado 2. It seems to me that's not an invitation the courts are going to take up. That would be more appropriate for Congress.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut off questioning in the interest of time, but I'll just mention that a lot of these issues are going to be a subtext for our next panel, which discusses innovations in campaign finance reform. So if you could hold your questions for that panel. We have a 10-minute break.